Trina, and thank the band.
And Ian.
And Ian, yeah, thank you. So if you haven't figured out by now, we're talking about the wonder of love at Christmas time. And as we talk about this wonder of love, I got to think about the word love, and love is not a noun. Love is not an adjective. Love is a verb. And if love is a verb, then that means that love is action. It means we're doing something. We're sharing with one another, or we are experiencing something because of love. And this morning, what I'd like to do is just share a few stories with you about love that just talks about this idea of the wonder of love. There was a fellow by the name of James Moore. James Moore was a young man, about 23 years old. 2 days after Christmas, he was driving home from work, just kind of basking in the glow of the holiday that he had shared with his family, when a car came out of an intersection and had run a stoplight, and he crashed into the left side of the car. James came out okay, but the person driving the car was killed. His name was Zeke Stefanik. James didn't know Zeke, but afterwards he felt great remorse for 2 days and longer, obviously, because of this accident, because of what had happened, even though it wasn't his fault. Quite unexpectedly, Zeke's mother called and asked James if he could come over to his house and be with his family, and that she understood it wasn't his fault, and she wanted him to know that she would like to pray with him. Now, James's family also was a family that prayed together, and so they opened their arms and asked the Stefaniks to come over. They prayed together. They started to talk. About 4 days later, or 5 days later, they had a memorial service, and they'd prayed together every day during that time. And during the memorial service, James Moore was asked to walk with the family up to the front for the memorial service. Now, James said that through the years that soothed him in such a way for a family to reach out and love him after what had happened. And it made a difference in his life, and it made a difference in the way he taught, the way that he walked, the way that he shared with others. Many things can happen in our lives, but through tragedy sometimes, we can adopt one another by putting grace and love above everything, above the experience itself. We know that love showers us with grace if we are open to it, if we're receptive to it. Another story I want to share with you is called The Game of Basketball, and it was by Rick Lauber. Rick was at Christmas with his sister, and she had cooked this unbelievable meal. The turkey that you can just about smell, browned just perfectly, the gravy, stuffings, the mashed potatoes. Starting to look forward to it now? That kind of thing. And they were just finishing dinner, and they were all feeling very plump and very happy and very comfortable. And of course, they were throwing their compliments to his sister. When his sister's son, who was about 11 years old, he got into basketball. And he got up and he decided he was going to show how well he could dribble. So he dribbled all around the table. Then he dribbled into the kitchen. Then he dribbled in the living room. Then he dribbled back around the table. And everybody watched him and applauded. And then what happened is Rick's father stood up. He was a much older man, and he was shaky. And as he stood there, hardly being able to stand, the little fellow looked at everybody else, and they shook their head yes, and he threw the ball gently to his grandfather. And his grandfather caught the ball. His grandfather dribbled the ball, and as he did, a twinkle came into his eye. Light filled his heart. He was joyous. You could tell he was really excited and remembered what basketball was all about. And then he took the ball and he passed it to one of his family members. And he opened his arms and said, pass it back to me in a sense. He didn't say that, but that's what he was doing. So they passed it gently back. And all of a sudden, this passing the basket all around became a game. And everybody around the table were just all so excited, and they were shouting at each other, pass it to me, Dad, pass it to me. What you don't know is that Rick's father had Alzheimer's. He didn't even know Rick's name. He sat through the dinner as though he didn't even know where he was. And yet he remembered basketball. And Rick said that for the rest of his life, he remembered the gift that was given to him of how he could relate to his father, because he wasn't able to many times. His father was a quiet man. His father was a man who loved the family but didn't show it very well. His father was a man who didn't play basketball or get into any of those kinds of things that he knew about. And the only thing he could remember his father taught him was chess. And so here was a man who was not estranged from his father, but really didn't know his father that well, and who was watching his father's condition continue to decrease, his ability and his health. And yet, in this moment, this man came alive. And he got to experience the truth of his father. And he carried that as a moment of love for the rest of his life. Many of us can relate to stories like that, I'm sure. Things have happened in our lives. Another one I want to share with you this morning is a story called The Golden Box. And it's about a young girl, about 5 or 6 years old, who found the stash of golden Christmas paper that her father was saving. And they didn't make a lot of money, but this was a special type of paper that her father had bought because he wanted to wrap everybody's present in. And this little girl found this paper, tore into the paper, and used it to wrap a gift. Her father, finding this out, scolded her and said, you know, that paper wasn't yours. You shouldn't have taken that paper, young lady. You shouldn't have done that. And the little girl, obviously, with her feelings hurt, kind of looked down and walked away. Well, a couple of days later, it was Christmas, and they were unwrapping the gifts, and underneath the tree was this shoebox, big shoebox. It had been wrapped and wrapped and wrapped in the gold paper. The little girl came up and said, Daddy, this is for you. Well, you know how he felt, about this high. So he grabs the little girl and hugs her and says, honey, I'm so sorry. Thank you so much for the gift. And then he opened the box. And there was nothing in the box. And all of a sudden he reacted again and he said, honey, I know you meant well, but you know, you're supposed to put a gift in a box when you give it to somebody. I mean, you know, he went back to his childhood, really, okay? And some had been missing in him, but anyway. And so what happened was is the little girl started to cry and she said, Daddy, the box is full. And he said, what? And she said, it's full with all the kisses that I threw in there every day. Every day I've been throwing it. And so it's just running over with kisses. Can't you see them? Well, he looked at him and he said, certainly I can see them. And what do you say, right? But more important, he said, what I could do is feel them. It was a year later that his little girl was killed in an accident. And they say that next to his bed was this golden box. And that anytime he felt down, anytime he experienced something that was a struggle for him, he would take one of those kisses out of the box and touch it to his cheek. He felt that love of that little girl for the rest of his life. Love at Christmas. Another story is a little more personal. It's my experience at Christmas. I was at a seminar. I was actually teaching a seminar, and we were talking about forgiveness, and we were talking about our perceptions and how we can correct our perceptions as adults as to what we had when we were children. And the way we corrected that perception was to go back in time, sit, and think about an age. And what I did is I sat as a demonstration, and I didn't know this was going to happen, but I thought about an age I said to the group, somewhere around 6 years old is where I'm going to go back to. So I just focused on 6, and all of a sudden, this experience came to me. It was an experience of Christmas. When I was 6 years old, 5 maybe, I got a Harley Davidson bike for Christmas. Now, I know that that is a collector's item today. But let me tell you, when I was 5 or 6 years old, it was not a collector's item because everybody else got a Schwinn, a new Schwinn bike that Christmas. My bike had been rebuilt by my father, repainted by my father. And as a 5 or 6 year old, what I thought and what I interpreted, and I didn't even realize this, I've been carrying this with me through many years. It wasn't slowing me up. It didn't mean I didn't love my parents, but I still was carrying with this idea that they didn't love me quite as much as the other kids loved their children because they got a Schwinn bike. But you know, as an adult, I could look at this through different eyes. And what I realized is that my dad must have spent hours, because he was a perfectionist when it came to fixing things, fixing this bike up. It looked brand new, but you knew it wasn't. And again, when I went on Christmas morning, I wasn't too proud of it. But when I looked back and looked at it through the eyes of an adult and understood how much my parents loved me, I was able to understand the love that was built into this bicycle. And it changed my perception. One of the cool things that happened is at Virginia Diner in Waverly, Virginia. I sat with my mother and dad many years ago, and I shared with them this story and how much I really appreciated what they had done for me that I probably had never communicated before. And my mother didn't cry as easily as my dad did. My dad started crying, my mother started crying, and then Richard started crying, and the waitress comes up and said, "May I help you?" Okay? Yeah, okay, anyway. But, you know, it's love that creates these opportunities in our lives. It was love that helped James Moore through that tragedy a couple days after Christmas. It was love that was really radiating through that basketball and that game of basketball through Rick's father that Christmas. It was love that caused a little girl to give her father a box full of kisses. It was my parents' love for me that they took the time to give me a really nice Christmas. Now, one of the things I want to do, and I will warn you right now, we're still having a sync problem when I download. This is out of sync. You might want to close your eyes and listen to it, or you may want to watch it and just put up with it, okay? But I'm going to show it because it's a powerful story. And it's called the White Envelope Project. Anybody ever heard of that? The White Envelope Project. It is something, an organization that does exist today, and they do great work. And I want you to just hear this story of how it got started.
It's just a small white envelope stuck among the branches of our Christmas tree. No name, no identification, no inscription. It has peeked through the branches of our Christmas tree for the past 10 years. It all began because my husband Mike hated Christmas. Or not the true meaning of Christmas, but the commercial aspect of it. The overspending, the frantic running around at the last minute to get a tie for Uncle Harry, the dusting powder for Grandma. Knowing he felt this way, I decided one year to bypass the usual shirts and ties and sweaters and so forth, and I reached for something special just for Mike. The inspiration came in an unusual way. Our son Kevin was on the wrestling team at the school he attended. Shortly before Christmas, there was a non-league match against a team sponsored by an inner-city church. These kids, dressed in sneakers so ragged that Shoestrings seemed to be the only thing holding them together, presented a sharp contrast to the spiffy uniforms that our boys were wearing. Because of his heart for kids, even though they were on the opposing team, Mike wished just one of them could have won. It was hard for him to see their spirits crushed. Mike loved kids, all kids, and he knew them, having coached Little League. That's when the idea for his present came to me. That afternoon, I went to a local sporting goods store, and I bought an assortment of headgear and wrestling equipment, and I sent it anonymously to the inner city church. On Christmas Eve, I placed the envelope on the tree, the note inside telling Mike what I had done, and that this was his gift from me. His smile was the brightest thing about Christmas that year, and in succeeding years. Each year I followed the tradition. One year sending a group of mentally handicapped children to a hockey game. The next year sending a check to a pair of elderly brothers whose home had burned to the ground the week before Christmas, and on. The envelope became the highlight of our Christmas. It was always the last thing opened on Christmas morning, and the children, ignoring their new toys, would stand in wide-eyed anticipation as their dad lifted the envelope from the tree to reveal its contents. As the children grew, the toys gave way to more practical presents, but the envelope never lost its allure. But the story doesn't end there. You see, we lost Mike last year due to cancer. When Christmas rolled around, I was still so wrapped in grief that I barely got the tree up. But Christmas Eve found me placing another envelope on the tree. And in the morning, it was joined by 3 more. Each of our kids, unbeknownst to the other, had placed an envelope on the tree for their dad. The tradition has grown, and someday will expand even further to include our grandchildren standing to take down the envelope. Mike's spirit, like the Christmas spirit, will always be with us. This year, as small white envelopes find their place on our tree and thousands of trees around the world, we hope you will join us in giving something different. To learn more about honoring a loved one through this special tradition, please visit www.whiteenvelopeproject.org.
whiteenvelopeproject.com, and even join in if you'd like, okay, this Christmas. If anybody would like to do something for somebody in the community and then bring an envelope and put it on one of these trees, you're welcome to do that. .org, thank you, .org. So anyway, what these stories add up to again is love in action. And you know, one of the things I appreciate about Unity of Richmond is that you all are love in action. We don't just do it at Christmas time. We do it for Caritas. We do it at Feed More a couple times during the year when people need food year-round. You do it by serving one another in very special ways. When somebody is suffering, not suffering, that's not the right word, when somebody is experiencing a health challenge, people step up. We had a remembrance service the other night. We saw the love and felt the love in the room. We do it by going to Waverly, Virginia, or North Carolina, and helping people who have lost their home sometimes, or lost a roof off their house or their trailer home. And some of our folks go and put it back on. We do it by bringing some food once in a while. That's an act of love. We do it by hugging each other, by saying hello to each other. We do it by building a spirit that we feel on Sunday mornings. It's there all the time, but we feel it because we're together. Love is a word. It is action, and you are that action. I appreciate all that you do to create love in our community, to create love for one another, and to share that love unconditionally with everybody. It is that power of love that gives us the ability to forgive. It's that power of love that gives us the ability to agree and disagree in love. It's that power of love that puts a smile on our face. It's that power of love that allows us to grieve and move through the grief. It's that power of love that sustains us. And it's the power of love that is the light that you are in the world. Love is wonderful, and each of you are the wonder of love. Thank you.